Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. We can go ahead and get started. My name is Hai. I'm co-founder of Affluence, the company behind Matrix. So today's webinar is on the introduction to Matrix. And what I really hope to do is give you a good overview of what Matrix is and how it can help you. Hopefully, you're all here today because you're looking for a way to become more effective, more efficient, and becoming better at managing emails and juggling all those tasks and priorities that we have. And hopefully, as you walk out of this meeting, you'll get some excitement about how to use Matrix to fulfill those goals. The webinar is recorded. And then I also mentioned it in the chat section, you can send me questions. So during the webinar, when I get a chance, I'll look at them at the very end. I'd be happy to field any questions that you have. Leverage this opportunity as a way to get feedback, or if you have any detailed questions whatsoever. With that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the presentation. All right, so the goals for today, first, help you understand the basics and the fundamental behind Matrix, and then provide you a framework to get the most out of PM with the least amount of work, and then help you envision what your work and life success looks like with Matrix. There's three challenges that I always see when I talk to customers. And over the past decade, I've talked to thousands of customers, done countless interviews as well as surveys and so forth. And the three recurring challenges are: one, team members have trouble understanding what's priority right now. What happens is that teams are getting inundated with so many projects, so many different tasks, and so forth. It's extremely difficult to actually stay online. And not only that, over the last several years, remote work and the lack of in-office interactions have also created additional barriers where it's really difficult to be on the same page as your teammates. So if you're struggling with that, you're in the same place as the vast majority of people. The second is it's harder to keep track on the status of work across many areas of responsibilities. In fact, if you think about your own work, I'm sure that you have more than one project that you're working on, right? Actually, if you have one project, 3 action items, and you never have to talk to anybody, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't be here today. But the fact that you're here and struggling or looking for ways to improve your efficiency and effectiveness is an indication that there's just too much going on and you're having trouble tracking the status of that work. And then thirdly, emails and meeting cause far too much context switching. I get hundreds of emails every single day, and I try my best to prioritize them and answer them as quickly as I can, but there's always some that's going to fall through the cracks. So one of the things that others are struggling too is, how do you triage emails? How do you assign emails to the appropriate person, the appropriate resource? How do you actually set due dates on emails? And that's one of those things that Priority Matrix aims to help, because it's something that everyone struggles with. And a big reason why people come to Priority Matrix is because of the email management side. So what is Priority Matrix? It's a comprehensive email priority and project management software to help teams manage emails, conduct efficient meetings, and get real-time status updates on critical projects and priorities. So how does Priority Matrix help with those 3 challenges that we talked about? First, we use something called the 4-quadrant methodology, which I'll go into more details, to promote effective prioritization. And then secondly, what we do is we provide different views. So you have your tasks, you have your action items. What we do is we actually give you a different perspective on those tasks and action items to help you understand what needs to be done. And then not only that, be able to communicate that to the rest of your teammates to ensure that everyone's on the same page. You can look at Priority Matrix as, again, a communication tool to communicate your priorities, to communicate what really matters, what everyone should be focusing on. And then thirdly, we provide really deep integration into Microsoft Teams and Outlook. We're probably the most integrated solution in Microsoft Teams, and we continue to be at the forefront of all integration. So we have a pipeline over the next year of all the other things that we do with Microsoft, and we're also one of the earliest adopters of any Microsoft technology. So the thing is, if you use Microsoft ecosystem, Priority Matrix is probably the best solution out there for that. So what makes Priority Matrix different? It is Microsoft 365 security certified, which means we're audited as well as reviewed by Microsoft security personnel across our web app, Teams app, and Outlook app. And we're the only software application that achieved those goals. Secondly, I'm actually really excited about the whole AI thing. I know there's a lot of hype around that, but I think AI can actually be leveraged to help us achieve our goals and be more productive. And so we're on our side at Affluence, we're leveraging this as much as possible in ways to where we can actually make you productive. And then thirdly, we provide people-centric collaboration. So I am sure vast majority of you out there have explored so many different task management apps, so many project management apps. You probably have paper lists, to-do lists, and so forth. But Prioritization is a little bit more than that. Prioritization also provide what I call people-centric. So what that means is when you do something, you're always doing something for somebody, right? No matter what project it is, there's somebody that you're doing it for. So how can you find all the things that you're responsible for within the context of a person? And so that's what people-centric means. And then finally, Party Matrix is available as a SaaS, which is a standard software as a service solution, a HIPAA compliant solution for healthcare life sciences, an Azure government cloud solution for state and local government, as well as managed private Azure deployments for enterprise customers. So if you're interested in any of these other services, definitely reach out to us. My email is hi@affluence. You also reach out to us at support@affluence.com. We'd be happy to see if it's the right fit for your organization. So let's go to the fundamentals behind Party Matrix. So there's a famous quote attributed to President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." What's really fascinating about this is it captures the challenges that we all face so well. Every single day, we get action items that's thrown upon us, and we have no idea if they're the things that we should be focusing on, right? More so than anything, the things that are coming in, they're urgent because that last email requires your attention, that last message ping in Microsoft Teams, or that last text message. And guess what? We get gravitated towards responding to those messages. And so those things that are urgent are actually not important, whereas the things that are actually important are the ones that's actually been brewing in the background, right? These are the goals, the long-term goals that we have for ourselves or for our work, where you're trying to get a promotion, you're trying to get a raise. Well, guess what? You're not actively working on that this morning because you got a text message that reminded you to work on that, right? So Party Matrix aims to change some of those things, but if you look at it from this perspective, we really have to differentiate between those things that are important and urgent and those that are not. So one of the things I'd like to do is I like to ask you in the audience right now, take out a piece of paper and start writing down the things you have to do. And you're going to write it in one long list. It's going to be, maybe 5, 10, 20 items. And so as you write it down, one of the questions I have for you is, if you have to add another item, something else comes up, right? Your manager asks you to do something, a client asks you to do something, your board asks you to do something. Where do you add this new task? At the top or at the bottom or somewhere in the middle? And then likewise, well, you can't add in the middle because it's a piece of paper that you're writing on. So you got to go top and bottom, right? But then likewise, if I ask you to decide what to work on, how do you decide? Do you choose the thing at the top because that's what first came to mind, or the thing at the bottom because that's the last thing in? So, right, you heard first in, first out, last in, first out. Same thing applies to all our action items and to-do list. But the reality is it's more complex than that. What you need to work on is actually the thing that is important and actually drive towards your goals. And so now, instead of taking that list of 20 items and just working it in, from top to bottom, what I encourage you to do instead is actually split them into that dimensions of importance and urgency. The things that are important and urgent goes in quadrant 1, the do now. And then the things that are important but not urgent, then that's the things that goes in quadrant 2, the plan. And then what are the things you can delegate out to somebody else, or to another resource, or get someone else to do for you because you don't have the bandwidth for it. And then finally, everything else that is you don't know where it belongs yet goes in the inbox. So hopefully when you have these 20 items, you have at most 5 in quadrant 1, 5 in quadrant 2, and then everything else is on the bottom. And so now suddenly you've cut your task list in half. And then not only that, you know exactly where you focus your time. Now, here's where the magic happens. Take that list, this new quadrant that you just created, and walk around the office and start comparing notes. When you go to your manager and say, hey, by the way, these are my priorities. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Where are we aligned? Where are we not aligned? And then imagine if your manager show his or her matrix as well, right? And then you go to your colleague and it's the same thing. Now, suddenly you can have some really, really fascinating conversations around whether or not these priorities are actually aligned align across your team. So The 4-quadrant Eisenhower Matrix create alignment because it forces you to prioritize from the very beginning. And that's very, very difficult. By the way, this exercise is not trivial. It is so hard to actually properly prioritize. And that's what happens to most of us. We kind of just ignore it because it's hard. So we're like, you know what? I have no idea what is important and urgent. So I'm just going to work on whatever came in last, right? And then we find ourselves like that, running the treadmill constantly and not moving the needle. And so that's what you got to think about. And so success from using Matrix isn't about finding what everyone agrees on. It's about finding disagreements that should be a priority when it isn't. And so when you think about Matrix, the software itself, it's the digital version of that piece of paper with the 4 quadrants on it. And then what we do is we actually turn it into a very intelligent communication tool that works with Microsoft Teams, that works with Outlook, that pulls in your emails together, that actually allows you to collaborate and delegate and set reminders and due dates and track with the full history of everything that matters. So Matrix is a communication tool that makes it very, very clear what the priorities are for you as an individual, for your team, so that everyone's on the same page. And so that's the full context of why you should use Matrix and what it's all about. So I do want to remind everyone that this webinar is recorded and afterwards we'll post it on our website. If you have any questions whatsoever, reach out to us and also respond to me with any feedback that you have. I love getting feedback because, with these webinars, I try to improve them every single time. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump to the demo. Again, if there's any questions whatsoever during the course of the pre-product presentation, please send them in the chat and I'll try my best to answer it. Okay, so you should see my Matrix right here. So what I'm showing you is the web app version of our software. So as you can see, I'm in Matrix. I have a project selected, this project called My Team Priorities. And check this out, my quadrants are actually very similarly named to the 4 quadrants that I showed you from the Eisenhower Matrix. The fires/do now, the do later, the delegate, and the inbox. And as you can see, when I add a task in Matrix, I can't just put it to the list, right? I have to decide where it goes. So let's just say in the beginning, I want to go ahead and put down here into the inbox. So I'm going to say call Sue tomorrow. But one of the things that that's interesting about Matrix is that we actually use natural language. And again, we add intelligence whenever possible. So if I say call Sue tomorrow, 2 p.m., one of the things that Matrix will do is it'll create the task, the action item for you, but also it sets the due date and the time for you. So now I have an item that's due tomorrow, September 7th at 2 p.m. So one of the things that happens in Matrix is that as you create action items and you're actually tracking them, we strongly, strongly recommend adding due dates, adding reminders, adding context wherever possible. What happens is that we tend to create a lot of action items without clear deadline. And when there are no clear deadline, it's very, very difficult for you to understand on the dimensions of urgency when you just start thinking about it. So now I have a task, and that's a very, very simple task. This is something that I just have to do. But what if it's something that's a little bit more complex? So for example, I have an action item here, create new marketing plan, for Q4 due in 2 weeks. When I click on this action item, on my right-hand side, I open what's called item details. So item details is a way for me to add additional information around the task itself. So I have the project that task belongs in, the task, and you see how I used due in 2 weeks when I first created this. So then the due date was set for me. And what I did too is I actually create a star. When I star a task, it pops to the top. It's just a way to signify that this task is actually really critical. Again, I already have in quadrant 1, so starring it is just another dimension of importance. And here's the thing, if everything goes in quadrant 1 and everything is important and urgent, then nothing is. So keep that in mind when you're talking to your team. If you're a manager, when you talk to your direct reports and you're asking them to do everything because everything's on fire, that means it's a very, very poor planning on your part, right? And then vice versa. If your manager is asking you to do all these things and everything's important and urgent, then you push back and say, hey, I'm going to drop something. What do you want me to drop, right? And so therefore, that's what prioritization is all about. And that's how you communicate the priorities and making sure that everyone's on the same page. And then if you look down a little bit further into the item details, you have owner. So ownership is around who is responsible for this task. In Matrix, there can only be one owner. Question we get all the time, how can I have multiple owners? How can I ensure that everyone knows that, these are the people that's responsible for. We say there's only going to be one. Other people can be followers. And so here you can see how Eugenia is actually the owner of this task, and I'm a follower. So what does a follower mean? It means I get updates. If this task is updated or completed or progress is made, I'll get notifications and alerts that there's progress here and I can go and review it. So if I was a manager and I'm assigning someone a task, I automatically get added as a follower. So then when that task gets finished, you'll know, and vice versa. So there can only be one owner for that reason, because you want clear responsibilities. And then after that, you have progress, effort, reminders, and dates. So you saw how I said the due dates. One thing that's really, really interesting, or what I personally like to do, is I always set reminders as well. Whenever I create a task, those are the two things I do. Set a due date, set reminders. And here's the difference. If you're working on a task and it takes you, or that's due in 2 weeks, but it's going to take you 3 days to get done, if you set the due date for that day and that day comes and you get notification for the task and you didn't start yet, there's no way you can get that done. So reminders is a way for you to actually surface this Matrix action item up far before the time that you need to get started, right? So I have so many tasks where I actually want to follow up with the customer in a year. So think about that. Just think about your current task management system, the current way that you're managing your action items. If you have something that's due in a year, and then you have to do some preparation, in 10 months, does your system properly help you track that? And that's what Matrix does extremely good job at, which is I can go ahead and set that due date. So for example, I'm going to say due in 3 months here. And you see how, again, I use natural language to type it into Matrix, and then Matrix will update that for me. So due in 3 months, and I'm going to say remind me weekly. So what I've just done is I've set both the due date and the reminder for the task. And on a weekly basis, this notification will pop back up and allowing me to go back and ensure that I can look at it. And then, if I don't get it done, again, the next week, I'll get reminded again until I turn off the reminders. Very, very, very helpful. I strongly recommend you use this capability because, again, we have actually multiple views for you to take a look at any tasks that have due dates and so forth. And then as you scroll down a little bit more, we have the chat section. You saw how I actually typed some messages here in the chat. If this was used with your coworker can actually send you a message here. And for example, Eugenia can respond and say, hey, by the way, I've made some progress here. Do you mind reviewing it, right? And so if she says that, it'll actually update this chat. And then I can respond and say, hey, looks good. Could you make these changes as well? And so forth. And so I can have this back and forth conversation inside the chat section. Now, here's where this chat section is different from like the chat that you use in Microsoft Teams, for example. In Microsoft Teams, when you're chatting with somebody, there's no context. What happens is you can talk about anything. And so then you're actually jumping back and forth between 5, 10 different threads at any point in time. With Matrix, you have that chat, but it's with the context of the action item. And here's where it's important. Imagine now if I bring in a third person. Okay, so let's just say now I bring in Remy, who hasn't seen this task before. And, Eugenia and I have gone back and forth over weeks around all these different things we talk about. When I bring Remy in, Remy can go take a look at this and know exactly everything we've talked about. And so Remy is able to catch up on the task, understand the decisions made, understand all the changes to due dates and progress and so forth by reviewing the history of the task. And that's what makes this chat so powerful, because it's a history and it goes back to the very beginning. So when you have something that's in 3 years from now, you need to review, well, good luck finding that inside a Teams conversation. Good luck finding that inside a text message or an email thread, right? So Matrix provide that context in one central place. And then we have the notes section where you can go and you can create subtasks. So let's just say if I create 5 subtasks and I mark one subtask as done, then it's 20% progress. Of course, you can always override that. And then finally, we have a resource section. So resource is a way to attach additional information into the Matrix action item itself. Files, documents, links. Matrix is also able to link to itself. So what that means is every task, every project inside Matrix actually has a resource link. And so you're able to link those things together. Why do you want to do that? Let's say you want to create dependencies. In order to build a foundation, you got to pour the concrete first, right? Before you pour the concrete, you actually have to prepare the ground. So those are tasks or action items that actually are linked together, A, B, C. And so with Matrix, we actually link all that together. And if you do, and you set the due dates and so forth, then you're able to actually build Gantt charts and all that directly from Matrix. So that's what an item detail is inside Matrix. Again, you don't need the vast majority of these capabilities. As you use Matrix more, you'll find them to be immensely helpful. The one thing that you do want to always do is set the due date and set reminder, make sure the appropriate person is assigned. Going back to the matrix view itself, you can see how everything is actually drag and drop. So for example, let's say I have a task here. Earlier, I called to tomorrow. I'm going to go ahead and move it to quadrant 1. So now you can see that I move it here. And now think about Matrix as that communication tool again. Here is my team priority project. Within this, I'm able to see all the tasks, but every one of my teammates is on the same page as well. Right? So when my teammate logs into Matrix and they look at this project, they see the same quadrant view that I do, and that's very important. What happens is a lot of the time, all these priorities and goals and so forth is in our head, right? And you only have alignment when you get together in a meeting room and you're talking it through, and then you happen to talk about something that's important, and then suddenly everyone's disagreeing with each other, and then now the conversation completely went out of hand. It goes out of hand. So the goal with Matrix is to provide that alignment asynchronously. You don't have to be in the same room. You don't have to have a meeting to know what the priorities are across the whole team. You just go to Matrix at your convenience and see the priorities. And that is immensely helpful. We have customers who are global across every time zone. So when you have something like that, and if you're working with somebody who's 12 hours off, how often do you talk to them and actually get alignment on priorities? It's so difficult. In fact, just someone down the office is actually very difficult because they're doing their things, you're doing yours, and you think you're aligned, but you don't know. So again, when you use Matrix, make sure that you update the quadrants. Make sure that everyone goes and look at the appropriate quadrants and say, you know what, I agree with these things, and so let's go ahead and execute. And then as you get things done, you can actually mark that as done in Matrix. So Matrix itself, the quadrants themselves are actually also customizable. So let me show you what happens when you click on Edit Project right here. What that does is it brings up now the project details. The project details has the project name. The project details has the members that's in it. So these are the people that actually has permission to view this project. One thing that's really useful or something to recognize in terms of dealing with members is that if you are a member of a project, you have full access to the project. So from a permission standpoint, they can, that person can go and see the project, can edit the project, can create tasks, can change the due dates and so forth. But there's a history of all the changes. So if you're worried about someone, overriding a task or something like that, at least you know who did it and so forth. But you're able to also assign a task inside a project to somebody else within Matrix. Within Matrix, but not within the project as well. So in that scenario, they get access to that task, but they don't get access to the rest of the matrix. The user group, you can think of that as departments. So for example, sales, engineering, marketing, etc. So now you can go and say, okay, this is a marketing project. All the marketing people are going to be in here. And then when I add new team members to the marketing department, they can get full access to this. And the other thing is actually the quadrants themselves are customizable. So one thing earlier, we talk about the Eisenhower Matrix as being the core methodology. But at the end of the day, as you use Matrix more, one thing you'll realize is that actually your organizations and the way you work and the way your team works, you might think differently than the original basic template that we created. So you're actually able to go and change this. So for example, I can go and change this to P1. I can go and change this to P2. Some engineering organizations prefer to use this terminology instead, right? And so you can always use that quadrant for as inbox, or it might be resources. And here's the thing, what happens is as when I change the quadrant names here, or let's just say, I change the color of the quadrant here, and I get something that I really like, I can go ahead and save this as a template. So what's really helpful about the template is allows me to share this knowledge, this customized template with the rest of my organization. Now other people can use it too. And the other powerful thing about the template system is that you can actually make it copy the task as well. So let me give you an example. Let's say if you're a consulting firm and every time you onboard a new client, you have 10 different action items that you do for that client, right? Everything from contract review to setting deadlines and so forth. So when you create a Matrix project and you create all those different tasks, so for example, task 1 due in one day, task 2 due in 1 week, task 3 due in 3 weeks, and then a quarterly follow-up, etc. You can save that as a template. And then when you have a new client, you launch from a template instead. You can say this client will start on October 1st, and then everything in Matrix will be created for you. All the deadlines will shift exactly from the start date. So this works for client onboarding. This works for employee onboarding. This works for standard operating procedures, processes that you build up. So one thing I want to encourage you to do is if you think this is powerful within your organization, start using it to build out your templates and share that with other team members. And that allows them to also get started with Matrix really quickly. So those are the things that's on the item details. Now you notice I actually jump and I don't show you all the capabilities in every project and the project details or the item details. And I do that on purpose because those are advanced features that may be helpful to you. And that's how you get, 90, 95% value out of Matrix. But if you just copy and use some of these features that I've just mentioned already, then you'll get 80% of the value, which is 20% of the work. So that's how you deal with a project and all the details around it. Now, here we have the quadrants, but what happens is we always need a way to see it in a list form. So I told you earlier how you should always have task and priority in a priority matrix, but instead imagine if you actually need to find things that are overdue. And so the list view is very helpful for that. When you go to the list view, all the overdue tasks are red. So then you can actually sort by due here, and you can able to go through that project really, really quickly. You can make all the updates directly from here, and that syncs back to the matrix. I also have the calendar view, which again, I have the same task. You saw how I have call Sue tomorrow here. I can actually drag it directly from here as well. So I'm able to move action items around. And again, all this information is just viewed from a different angle, right? To just think a different perspective. And so we have the matrix, which is the priority perspective. We have the list. We have the calendar perspective. And then other than that, you have the Gantt chart. So the Gantt chart allows you to take all the action items with due dates, and if there's dependencies, show that dependencies. And now you're able to print this out for your presentation. If you're a project manager, you know how cumbersome it is to sometimes create Gantt chart. Matrix does that automatically for you when you have that information in place. So these are the different views you have inside Matrix. And we always have ways for you to print and export this as well. Some customers actually really love the ability to go and export the history of all the changes in the project or all the history within an item. And it's both for regulatory purposes, but also just for record keeping. So that's how you can view the different items inside every single project. Now, let me show you what it takes to actually create a project. So to create a project, you can go to project here, and then you can choose create project. When I create a project, I have several options. The first is a blank project. So what is a blank project? Well, a blank project is pretty straightforward. I can just name the project really quickly. I can leave it as a basic Matrix template, or I can choose one of these other templates that I have, and then I can choose a color, and then from there I add project. So that's very, very straightforward. Alternatively, what I can do is I can go to public templates. So what's public templates? These are templates that we've created over time. And so this is some best practices we've seen over the years. Some of these are useful templates of Matrix that we think that many of our customers would benefit from. And so you can choose from here, for example, meeting agenda or a 30, 60, 90-day plan for managers. So imagine if you want to do quarterly planning with Matrix, you can just launch from this template instead. So the quadrant names reflect that. And then the other is the My Templates. My Template is where, as I mentioned earlier, the where you have templates that you save within your organization or that you save for yourself. So for example, I can choose, the employee onboarding template. And so that allows me to very, very quickly launch from any knowledge that I've created in the past. And then finally, we have a new way to create a matrix by leveraging our AI. And so the way the AI works is the following, which is you can just simply put in a goal inside Matrix, and let us build those action items for you. The reason we do this is because it just helps with brainstorming the action item that you want to do. So for example, I want to improve marketing reach by 20% for next quarter. Okay, is this a logical, reasonable goal? You might have something like this, or you might have some variant of this. Your goal might be to go and get a raise. Your goal might be to go and get a promotion, or to improve your operational efficiency, or improve and streamline your supply chain, right? So when you do use our AI system to create goals, what happens, we take that goal and we'll go use generative AI to actually create these action items to help you achieve that goal. So now I'm going to go ahead and press close. Now that work is actually being worked on right now, but I created a previous goal here, which is to start an online store for various products. So what happens is Matrix goes, builds out a whole matrix, and then from here, it actually uses the low effort, high impact, high effort, high impact, and create various action items for you, along with all the due dates for you to plan over the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months. And so this is just a starting point. And so you can imagine that if you have any specific objectives, when you start using Matrix, we'll try to go and actually give you those starting points. And so you can go from there. Anything that's relevant, you can work on. Anything that's not relevant, you can delete or mark as done. And similarly, you can see how, for example, I have the Q4 lead generation marketing plan, which is one that we just created from that AI goal project. And so now it has low effort, high impact. I can take this, I can assign to teammates really easily, and we can actually have a conversation around this on how to achieve that. So leverage Priority Matrix to actually help you and wherever possible, so that you can actually do those things that you want to do at a higher and more rapid speed. Okay, with that, I'm going to take a step back, because in the very beginning, I talk about emails as being a core problem that a lot of our customers have. So here, I've already shown you everything about Priority Matrix, as a way to manage priorities. But where do these tasks come from? I showed you how to create these tasks from AI, but also let me show you how to create a task from an email, because this is what I deal with, every single day. I get a bunch of emails, and from these emails, I want to make sure that I don't drop them, right? So let's just say when you get an email, if you go to Outlook, you can install the Priority Matrix for Outlook add-in. So if I have an email here, and let's say this email is something I want to review or I need to assign to somebody, I can click on this ellipsis after I've installed Priority Matrix for Outlook. I can go and I can choose prioritize email. What's going to happen is that I can take this email, convert it to a task. The subject becomes the item name, but I can go ahead and override this task. And then I can choose what project it belongs in. I can choose what quadrant it belongs in. I can assign the owner, so I can go ahead and assign it. Right now, this is only me in here. And then I can actually set a due date directly from here as well. And then I capture email. So what I've just done is turn an email into a task. And one thing that you'll see is on the right-hand side here, I get the item details. It looks just like the item details that you saw in the web app itself. But from here, I can actually add additional information, because I can say, remind me in 2 days. And so instead of just flagging an email, which is what the vast majority of us do, when you flag an email, it's great if you have 3 flag emails. But if you have 50 flag emails, good luck finding out what's important, right? So you want to make sure that you set a due date. You want to set a reminder on that email. And then when you talk about triage really is around taking the email and make sure that the appropriate people are aware of that email and ensure that they're actually able to answer that, and then also understand that progress has been made. So you can see that from this email, I can actually assign it to another teammate, right? And then I have this due date. And so now I can ensure that this email is going to be properly answered. And if it's not, you'll see it in Matrix, and you'll see that, this email is overdue and that no one's answered or no updates has been made. So that's how you go and turn an email into a task, and then add all those additional action items, additional metadata related to that. But what happens if I get an email, and then from that email, I want to attach an existing task? So let's say a client follows up with me and say, hey, did you get a chance to take a look at that previous task that we'd sent? And so you don't want to go and create a new task from that. Well, Priority Matrix is very unique because it's the only software add-in that allows you to to actually attach an email to an existing task. So for example, if I have this email right here, I can actually go and let's see here. You can see how I can search for another task in Matrix that already exists, and then I can go and hover over that task and attach the email to the existing task. And so that allows you to actually keep this whole thing organized as well, because you'll get emails that's follow-up that does not belong in a new task. And then the other thing to recognize too is that whenever you prioritize an email, the Matrix tag shows up right here inside your Outlook. And so this works in your Outlook for mobile, Outlook for web app, Outlook for desktop, Outlook for Windows, Outlook for Mac. And so Matrix add-in works across all of those Outlook systems. The other thing you can also do in terms of email management is forward an email into Matrix. So let me show you how to do that. So when you go back to Matrix here and you go to the inbox, so what is the inbox? The inbox is the list of action items that you have that does not belong in a project yet, right? And when I go to here, I can copy my secret inbox address. When I copy that secret inbox address, I can go to Outlook, I can create a contact from there. And now if I get an email from Outlook and I want to prioritize that email, I can actually forward any email into the secret inbox, and that will show up as a task in Matrix right here. And then from here, I can move it to the appropriate project or the appropriate quadrants. Every project inside Matrix has an inbox address as well, but this basic inbox is where you can actually use the capability the most. So I always have, I forward a lot of emails into Matrix for this exact same purpose, because sometimes I'm on mobile and it's more convenient for me to forward the email as opposed to, click on the UI and then convert into a task. So with that, I'm going to shift gear again and jump into Microsoft Teams. The reason I show Microsoft Teams is because more and more customers are using Microsoft Teams, and at the same time, our solution is extremely well integrated into the Microsoft Teams ecosystem. You don't need Teams to use Matrix, but if you do use Teams, definitely install Matrix. So when you go to the App Store, you can find Matrix. Once you do, make sure you right-click on here and pin Matrix. So now it's on the left-hand side. You can access Matrix very easily. And you can see how when I open my Matrix here, it looks exactly the same, very, very similar at least, to the interface you saw in the web app. On the left-hand side, I have my list of projects, the quadrant in the middle, the item and project details are on the right. And then the menu is actually just hidden up here. So you can go here and you can jump to create project or the inbox, etc. But there's a couple things that we do inside Teams that's extremely unique. So let me show you how that works. For example, if I go to a chat, and so you probably, if you use Microsoft Teams, you probably chat with a teammate all the time, right? You're talking about all the various things and so forth. So when you go to a chat, and if your teammate also uses Matrix, you can actually add a tab here and you can choose Matrix, and you have two options. You have the option number one, which is full project view. What that allows you to do is embed a Matrix project inside your conversation with a teammate. This is really helpful if you and your teammate work together all the time, and then you're working on one project that's really high priority, and so you're always looking at it, so then you can actually do that full project view. The other is the one-on-one view, and actually I already have this installed, so I'll show you right here. So when I open up the one-on-one view, I can choose my coworker, and what we've done is actually we flipped the entire project management data set around. And so as I mentioned earlier, it becomes people-centric. When I say people-centric, it shows you all the action item you have with your coworker, regardless of the project it's in. So if you work with a colleague, and with this colleague, you work across so many different projects, and with those projects, you have maybe 5 or 10 different Matrix projects that you're dealing with. If you're trying to find the tasks you have in common, I know how much of a struggle it would be to go into Matrix, scroll through each project, and find the tasks you have in common. So instead, with this view, it actually shows you all the things you have in common, regardless of that project. So then when you have a meeting together, when you have a one-on-one call and you're going through all your priorities and you're talking about all these different things that you're working on, it is so easy to see all those common tasks. And then not only that, I can actually create shared tasks directly from here. So for example, when I talk to my coworker and I want to assign him a task, I don't have to go into Matrix. I can actually just click add shared task, create the task here. I can set the due date. I can choose the project. I add it. And now both of us are on that. I'm added as a follower. And then when he makes progress and he updates the action item, I know exactly that there's been progress that's made. So this is a really, really powerful way to see those action items and really helpful for one-on-one meeting. The other thing I want to show you is that in the chat itself with Matrix, you're able to convert any conversation into a task. So for example, let's say a coworker sends you a message and say, hey there, could you send me the report? So instead of actually going to Matrix and actually creating a task from this, I can actually hover over this ellipsis, create PM item, and I can create a task from any conversation as well. There's one thing that's unique about Matrix is that we actually link back to that moment in time when you had that conversation. The use case for this is actually pretty straightforward. Imagine if you and your manager or are talking about something 6 months ago, and you said, could you do this and this and this, and then you have a various conversation that spins out of that. From there, you create a task in Matrix. Now, guess what? 6 months later, no one remembers the whole context around that, right? But with Matrix, we're able to take you back to that moment in time inside Teams when you had that conversation. Now you can review the history and see, oh, okay, this is what we talked about, and so this is why we're doing this. So that's inside Teams itself. You don't have to go open Matrix to create any of those tasks. And then the other thing is you can actually open up Matrix inside here and actually send messaging extensions. So you see I've already various examples here, but I can actually send a Matrix task directly in the Teams conversation. This is helpful if a teammate is not aware that you sent a certain task in Matrix. So this happens all the time. Sometimes you forget to go and check Matrix, or your teammate forget to check Matrix. You create a task for him or her, and then afterwards you didn't get a response because they didn't see it. You can remind them by actually sending that Matrix action item directly here, and they can view the item, they can mark it as done, they can update it directly from inside Teams. So that's how it works within the Teams conversation. Now, one of the things that we have here, what I also recommend that you install, is the chatbot. And so the way the chatbot works is the Matrix chatbot will send you updates and notifications as you're making changes. Or let's just say a task that you assigned got updated, or you were assigned a task. And so it's just one central place where you just get that notification on what changed. Now, we have multiple other integrations inside Teams as well. I'm not going to go into the details, but I'll just give you the high-level overview. One, we have integration into the meeting. So then when you're in a meeting inside Teams, you can actually pull up the agenda and use the Matrix agenda to actually pull action items directly into your Teams meeting so you can have a conversation around it. The other thing I want to show you is that we have these things called connectors. So I imagine that you probably have so many different applications you're using already. Well, we have several integrations that we do right out of the box. And so, for example, Jira, Outlook, To-Do, Planner, Azure DevOps. If you use any of those softwares, you can actually pull them into Matrix as individual projects. So then when you make changes across these other software, it's reflected inside Matrix. We also have additional add-ons, such as the Microsoft Edge add-on, as well as Power Automate. So for those who are aware of Power Automate, it's a way to set rules. If this happens, then this happens, right? And so, for example, you can create rules where if you use Microsoft Forms inside and create a form and you get a submission, create a task in Matrix, and so it allows everyone to be aware that these different things are happening across your entire ecosystem. So with that, I'm actually going to pause the presentation of the product. I'm going to jump back to the presentation itself. So it's now on you. And so, if you, again, have Teams and Outlook, make sure you install Matrix for that. Again, Matrix works across mobile, as well as our integrations on the web app. And then the other thing I always recommend is create 3 projects, right? A personal priorities. These are things that you have to do for yourself. A share team priorities. This is where you share with your managers or your direct reports. And then key initiatives, such as a major goal that you have or anything that's really critical that you work on. One thing I want you to recognize is that you don't have to put everything in Matrix. Focus on the things that actually are important. Again, don't forget that Matrix is a communication tool, and as a communication tool, it is very important that you use it to share with others so that they're on the same page as you, or at least if you have Protomatrix and you're not using it with your managers, when you're in a meeting, your manager, show them your Protomatrix, so then they can go and quickly see what it is that you're working on. And then invite appropriate team members and pitch on why it's important to focus on high impact tasks. The goal is to identify the things you don't have to do. It is an absolute waste of resources if you work on action items that have zero impact or that is actually not a high priority. That's not relevant to the whole organization. So use Protomatrix to tease those out. And then when you create action item in Protomatrix itself, make sure you set due dates and then make sure that you put in the appropriate quadrants, right? Use the same terminology as we do, quadrant 1, 2, 3, 4, and then as they come due and so forth, come back to Protomatrix, mark them as done, etc. And then of course, ruthlessly prioritize because otherwise you're just wasting time and not just your time, but your coworkers' time, and then doing things that don't matter. So some advice, I think it's best to use Protomatrix to track high impact tasks first. So you don't want to go and track, grocery lists. It doesn't really make sense for that purpose because, you can probably do that really quickly on a piece of paper or something like that. And then use it as a communication tool. Just always think of Protomatrix as a way to take all these things that's in your head and putting down into a visual form that everyone can see and be aligned on. And then use Protomatrix to manage your individual goals. You saw how I showed you the AI capability to take any of your goal and turn it into a task. If you're looking to improve your fitness or become better at anything, try Protomatrix to see if some of those action items that we suggest actually help you achieve that. And so what success with Protomatrix should look like. One, you have one central place to track all your priorities. So then if there's any confusion whatsoever on what it is you need to focus on, you go to Protomatrix, you look at the matrix, and you agree or disagree, but at the end of it, you commit, right? And then everyone on the same page is aligned, and that repetitive procedures are templatized. And so again, if you create a series of tasks and you have to create these tasks over and over again, use our template system. It will really, really save you time for future work. And then finally, make sure that you install our Outlook integration, prioritize your email, and so assign them to the appropriate people as well. I mean, for me personally, without Protomatrix for managing my emails, I would start losing it real fast because I just get too many emails. And so Protomatrix email integrations, Outlook integrations for managing emails is extremely helpful. And the ability to set due dates and reminders on email is phenomenal. So make sure that you do that. And with that, I conclude my presentation. If there are any questions right now, please feel free to send them in the chat and I'll try my best to answer it. I saw that there was a question around if you delete an email after putting in Protomatrix, will delete from there too? The answer is no. So what happens is there's actually several ways that you can integrate between Outlook and Protomatrix, and you can have the option to to upload the email into Protomatrix. So if you do upload the email into Protomatrix, then when you delete the original email, it's still inside Protomatrix. Alternatively, you can go and not upload the email. In that case, if you delete the original email, then the link from Protomatrix to that email is broken. Now, the reason you want to upload is then you can go and use the Protomatrix to assign that task to a teammate, and the teammate can also open that email because it's uploaded as an EML file. So then your coworker can actually open that email and respond to that email if needed. Instead of you forwarding an email and inviting multiple people into a thread, and then it gets real messy real soon because now you have one giant thread and you have no idea what's the latest on that thread, and you're not able to do status update and so forth. So think of Protomatrix as a more intelligent way to manage email forwarding. So if you're finding yourselves forwarding email, use Protomatrix instead. All right, let's see, are there other questions? Thanks for all these questions inside the Q&A. We actually generally don't use the Q&A, we use the chat, but actually there's a chance we might have missed many questions in the past on these webinars. So there's a question around, does PM Calendar also integrate into MS Outlook? So every project inside Party Matrix has a calendar. So let me show you what that looks like right here. So going back to Party Matrix, what happens is if I choose a project and then I open the project details, you see how when I go here, I have a calendar link for every project. So what happens is a calendar subscription. So when I get this link, I can add into my Outlook calendar, and then these Party Matrix action items actually shows up in my calendar. But it's not a two-way sync. So you can't go and just change the Party Matrix from Outlook itself, but you can see the tasks that are coming up. And then whenever you update Party Matrix, that calendar subscription would update. But Party Matrix, every project has a calendar. Every person has a calendar. So you can actually subscribe to your Party Matrix calendar across all your project as well. I generally don't recommend that because you have a lot of action items, a lot of due dates, and it'll overwhelm you real quick. So I recommend that you use the calendar link only for specific projects that you really care about. How would you best handle subtasks that becomes full-on task? So that's actually a really good question. So the way Party Matrix works is we can actually link all these various tasks together. So for example, let's just say, I'll go here and this is marketing plan here, and then I have these various subtasks. So while I can't paste the subtask itself here, but what happens is, let's just say I have subtask 1. I can actually link these two together. So I can go here and add as a resource, and I can link existing item, and then I can choose subtask 1. And so you can see how now instead of putting the subtask inside the note section, I actually add that subtask in the related section. And when I link to another task, one of the things I can do is actually I can set dependencies. So for example, I can say, this task is blocked by, this task blocks, or this task is caused by, or this task causes. And so these are ways for you to actually link these tasks together and create a causal relationship or communicate a causal relationship between those. So if you have a bunch of tasks that actually are related to each other, I recommend using this relationship resource. So in terms of what happens when you have too many reminders, that's a great question. So if you do have reminders on a task, it will ping up, it will come up. And what happens is you see it in the home section here. So when you go to the home view, what happens, you see the alert. And within the alert itself, these, for example, the kind of actions, the kind of things that will show up, tasks that you were assigned, tasks where you assign somebody and they updated that you're a follower on, or if you set reminders and due dates, as the time comes for that, it'll pop up here in the alert. It does get overwhelming if you have a lot, but you can also clear them as well. So for example, you can clear notifications for finished items, you can clear all notifications or clear alerts older than a day. And then the way it works with reminders is if you set those daily reminders or weekly reminders and you didn't get to it, well, guess what? It'll pop back up again. So for me, I continue to set reminders because it's so important to set reminders, and I don't mind being overwhelmed. It's better to be aware of those changes as they occur. So how do you recommend overcoming the ADHD urge to star everything? That's a fantastic question. And by the way, Party Matrix has been recommended by many psychologists for ADHD for precisely the reason of having a central place to write all this down, right? Because all of us, I think, have ADHD in some form, and that's because it's not by choice necessarily, but because we have so many things that's going on at any point in time. I find that I struggle more and more with multitasking, and whereas with Party Matrix, I can actually write that down and get it out of your head instead. Now, again, if you star everything, then if everything's important and urgent, then nothing is. So make sure that you ruthlessly prioritize and only have a quarter of the things in quadrant 1, and then a subset of that starred. Again, if you do everything as starred, everything in quadrant 1, then Party Matrix is no better than a list. So don't use it that way. Just make sure that you're constantly aware of it, and then make those tough, hard decisions. So does PM understand tomorrow and attach dates to it? And the answer is yes. So when you create a task in Party Matrix, you can see how, I can say something due in 1 month, something due in 1 week, something due tomorrow, and you can say due tomorrow, 2 p.m. You can say do in 3 hours, etc. And so Party Matrix actually understands that from the very beginning when you create those tasks. And then at the same time, in the chat section, here, you can see that I can say, do in 2 weeks, remind me tomorrow. And so whenever the text turned green here, it means that our system tries to interpret it. So this is actually the list of commands. So you search for Party Matrix command, we actually have these various commands that you can use. And so I can send that in the chat here in case anyone's interested. But in the command itself, you can actually use that as a way to see what are the things you can type into Party Matrix. So for example, everything from completion to assign to somebody, etc. Let's see here. Okay, is there one more question? How to use Party Matrix, whether Party Matrix can be used, as an individual versus across the whole organization. You don't need the whole organization to use Party Matrix. You can see when I show you Party Matrix here, you can create these personal projects. And so from there, you can actually manage your task. And then you can create these team projects where you can just share with just your manager. The whole idea around Party Matrix is a communication tool, right? So what that means is that it's just about taking the stuff that's in your head and putting it down. Now, if you can also see other people's priorities, then the benefits is more than 1 + 1. 1 + 1 = 3. So across the whole organization, then you get this opportunity to actually create complete alignments, or at the very least, you'll find everything that you disagree or agree with across the organization. And so that's where Party Matrix might be extremely powerful. And so if you're able to find an initiative or a project that you don't have to do, it'll save the company millions of dollars by actually saving the effort from not having to get those wrong priorities executed. But at a personal level, even for just yourself, you can create these personal priorities. And then when you go in a meeting with your manager, show them your priority list, right? And so it's very, very straightforward. And now everyone can be aligned. And then at some point, your manager might come on board. And then from there, you can actually share this information in real time as opposed to during the meeting. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a concept between asynchronous and synchronous. Synchronous, when you're in a meeting with somebody, right, you have to be there at the same time. Then you can sync up and you can look at all the priorities, right? That's fantastic. Customers have sat in a conference room and project Party Matrix on the big screen, and they go through the list, and it's very easy to see what the priorities are and have really meaningful discussion. But at the same time, asynchronous means allow everyone to access and look at the priorities when it's convenient. If you're an early riser, you're up early, you're looking in the priority list, and you're able to make those changes and updates and so forth. And then you can make comments inside Party Matrix, and then your coworker who looks at it later can go and still be on the same page. But you don't actually have to have a meeting just to get alignment. And that's what we want to avoid. And hopefully when you use Party Matrix more and more, you learn to trust Party Matrix as that central place for those priorities instead of worrying about having the meeting for it. All right, fantastic. These were really, really good questions. If there are any other questions, feel free to send me a message, hi@affluence.com. We would love your feedback if there's anything that you would like us to talk about in future details. Someone asked about cost. So we have various cost structures. So if you go to affluence.com/pricing, you'll see a lot of our a la carte options. And then we also have enterprise options as well. So if you have any specific questions there, send us an email to support@affluence or sales@affluence.com, and we'd be happy to talk about that. But our pricing is extremely straightforward. We also have the ability for you to get Party Matrix through Microsoft as well. All right. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate all the questions today. Again, this webinar is recorded, and so we'll post it up. If you have if you want to share the recording with your teammates, you can. With that, thank you all. Appreciate it. Bye.